Hey, welcome to Higher Cooking. Here we are today on a live stream, seeing if we can make one of my favorite dishes of all time. It's a healthy dish. It's a dish I ate when I was growing up. It's a very simple dish, but at the end of the day, I think you'll find it's a wonderful main meal or even a great side dish. Today we're making green beans and olive oil the Lebanese style. So this is a pretty straightforward recipe, and one of my favorite things about this recipe is today we're actually cooking with green beans and some tomatoes from my own garden. So this should be a lot of fun. Hang on, there's no editing, no cuts, no nothing. I'm just going to try to cook from the heart directly in here and make the best green beans that you've had ever. So really the easiest way to begin this process is to get some great green beans. And one of the tricks I learned early on, I found this actually, I was in a Chinese buffet and I was watching this lady prep, and she was using just scissors to cut her green beans. You know what? And I thought to myself, that's the best way ever to prep green beans. So all she simply did was take a pair of scissors and cut the ends off. It's a little harder here to do it this way, but she just simply cut the ends off. It made it really easy instead of using a knife to do it. So just something to think about as you're prepping a lot of these, because it's one of my least favorite activities is actually having to make and prepare the green beans for this. Alrighty, so what we're going to do is I've got a nice heavy pot here warming up on our burner. I can start to feel it warm up. And the first thing that we're going to want to do is saute our onions. This recipe calls for a lot of olive oil, so use a good quality olive oil. It adds so much flavor and depth to the dish that cheaping out and using a cheap olive oil is going to give you those results. So I'm going to use a really nice olive oil. I'm going to put about a tablespoon and a half in here. You can see by the colors of this how rich this olive oil is, how nice and dark it is. What we're going to want to do is bring in our garlic and our onions and saute these so we can really start to get the caramelization. So I like to start with the onions because I don't want to burn the garlic. So I'm going to feel this, let it get warm. I'm going to add these into our hot oil. Looks like there's that part of that green bean that got in there. And now just simply really want to start working these onions around. You can see I cut them up into small pieces. This is one full large white onion. And I want to make sure it gets really coated in this olive oil. And this is going to take about 3 or 4 minutes to really saute these and get these caramelized. Do not skip on this step. You're adding so much flavor to your vegetables when you caramelize these onions. Even if there's people out there that don't like onions, when this is so cooked down, you're really just imparting the flavor of the onion and the sugars, and not really having some of the texture that a lot of people sometimes don't like in onions. So we're going to let this go for a little bit. And this is what makes cooking live fun, because I can't fast forward the process. So let's just go ahead and do this. I prepped these onions earlier. I prepped the green beans. And so now what we're simply going to do is keep bringing the heat up just a bit until we get some good caramelization. They smell great. I think I had this dish the very first time when I was a little kid. I'm fairly certain my grandfather made it the first time. There were quite a few dishes that had like similarities to them. We do green beans, we do squash, we would stuff squash with like a filling with like meat and rice. But usually at the end, most of those dishes then were served with like a tomato, olive oil, garlic kind of base. Another great thing about this is it really allows you to bring in a lot of flavors, but it's pretty healthy. This is a meatless dish. I eat this many, many times just as the main dish over a little bit of Syrian rice, and I'll show you how we'll make that in another video. So simple. Right now you can really start to hear the olive oil heating up. I can start to see, we want to get the onions a little past translucent. But we don't want them to brown way too much. We want them to be slightly to that stage where they're about to brown, so just past translucent. That's when the sugars actually start to release in these and add that. And all the flavors, we're gonna put everything in this pot, cook in one single pot and bring it all together. One of the things that I love about this dish is when you make it today, it's great. But if you refrigerate it and reheat it the next day, it becomes even better. Those flavors all really come together and you start to add a lot of depth. At this point, once I start to see my onions getting here, I like to sweat them just a little by adding just a little bit of salt. So maybe just a little bit of a teaspoon, it helps release some of the waters in the onions. So let's get those going. Oh yeah, now we're starting to see this really well. It's really hard to beat the smell of onions and olive oil. It's just one of my favorite things. If you grew up in a household where there was a lot of cooking and you had onions and garlic and olive oil, you know how warm that feeling is, and it's so nice. It's one of the things I just love about cooking is the flavors that it brings to the house. All right, these are really starting to look good. Almost there. I'd say probably another 2 more minutes. So if you're doing this at home, I would suggest that these usually take around 10 to 12 minutes to really get your onions translucent over a medium-high heat. If you turn it too high, what happens is you burn the onions. If it's too low, it just takes you forever. So you'll end up finding that sweet spot for yourself. But do not skip on this step. Yeah, really starting to sound good. I like doing this in a heavy pot because it holds the heat. And then the final few steps, as we add the green beans and the tomatoes and more olive oil, we really want to cook this down and really render it well. So having a heavier pot like this helps in that process. It maintains the heat through and through. Okay. As you can see here, it's just now starting, just a little bit of the brown spots are starting to appear. You can see it on the bottom of the pan. I don't know if you can see those very well, but they're just starting to brown just a bit. I've got them right where I'd like them. At this point, I like to add my garlic. In this case, I'm adding 3 cloves of garlic. And oh man, once that garlic hits this, oh man, does that smell good. I can feel it starting to stick on the bottom of the pan, and that's exactly where I want to get this to. I can see it heading on the edges just a bit. Let's keep working this around. Now, do you see the browning on the bottom of the pan? That's that caramelization that we were looking for. It's just starting to occur now. This is perfect. I want to keep these moving. At this point, if I was cooking just using fresh tomatoes only, I would add those. But since my garden didn't have enough fresh tomatoes at this point, I picked what I had. So I've got here about a half a cup of fresh tomatoes. I'm going to go ahead and add those in here. And those will cook down. A little secret is anytime you use fresh tomatoes, they have so much water in them that when you cook them, they kind of really reduce down and you almost miss a little of that tomatoey flavor. So what a lot of great chefs do is add tomato paste or a concentrated tomato to really amp up that flavor. So we're going to do that once we get these cooked down a little. And whenever you use tomato paste, make sure that you're cooking it in here. If you just stick it in and then stir it into like the rest of the dish and you don't actually cook the tomato paste, it leaves this almost like metallic type of flavor. So it's really important in this, and I'm going to add about 2 tablespoons. Okay, that looks to be pretty good here. So I've got my 2 tablespoons of the tomato paste in here. If I can get the lid back on, that'll be great. All right, so I got my tomato paste. And when I say cook it, it means it needs to actually get incorporated and brought together with the rest of the flavors here. You can see it's starting to brown a little. Cooking tomato paste like this will take probably 2 minutes at a medium-high heat. You can smell it almost transition out of that kind of acidic smell into almost a sweeter, like spaghetti sauce almost smell as you're doing this. So this is great. Now we've got this. You can really start to see the flavors coming together, making a good base. Those tomatoes are starting to, out of our own garden, are starting to get incorporated with the rest of this. Man, this looks good. You can see I keep spinning this around. We can see. Ah, this is good. All righty. Now we've got a really good base down. I can see I'm going to add a little more olive oil here now. I want it to have a little more to it, so I'm going to add maybe another tablespoon in here right before we put in the green beans. All right, we're going to add our green beans now, and we want to mix these in. We're going to cook the green beans like this until they're bright green, which is usually about 3 minutes at this heat. And once I start to get these worked around, you'll start to see the green beans, because the green beans are going to take all these flavors and absorb them and really just add their own sweetness. You can start to see them starting to change colors just a bit. All right, I can start to see them starting to get a little brighter green. I like making sure they have a good coat of the olive oil and the onions all mixed in with them as well. And this is looking good. Keep trying to scrape that bottom off. That's where all those great flavors are. We're going to add some more liquids into this eventually as well to really bring this together and help these beans not only cook but steam just a bit. Now hopefully you can see we're starting to get some of those colors. We can see it burning just a bit on the bottom, which is good. So we're going to keep rubbing that off. Man, this looks really good. Now what I'm going to do is add 1 can of crushed tomatoes. You can use anything from, going to add 1 can of crushed tomatoes. You can use crushed, you can also use chopped. You can use whole tomatoes and break them up with your hands. I would prefer to use fresh tomatoes, of course, but they're not always available, especially out of my own garden. So in this case, I'm going to add this full jar. And you can see how much liquid's in all these crushed tomatoes. It's really going to help cook these green beans. Okay, let's do that. A little trick. We're going to need to add about a half a cup of water in as well. So I like just to fill up my can with water. It helps me get all of the tomato sauce out of there, or the tomato paste, I guess crushed tomatoes out. And it brings the liquid that I need in as well. So we've got this going. Man, this looks good. I always see this as a Christmas-like thing because of the red and the green. Let's keep moving this. Now at this point, you notice the only spices I've added so far was just salt. And this is where you could really flavor this to your desire. I'm going to use a 7-spice mixture that I make for a lot of my Lebanese cooking. This includes nutmeg, coriander, cumin, black pepper. What else does it have in it? And a few others. I'll leave the recipe in the comment section so you can add this. In this case, I'm going to use my 7-spice mix, and I'm going to add around 2 tablespoons of this to our beans. Okay, now looking good. And at this point, I'm going to add, I think I'm going to need a little more water. I'm going to bring in 1 full cup of water. Okay, and so hopefully you can see the thickness that we have here. I make mine much more of a stew than I've seen other people where theirs are just almost loose green beans. This is the way that we had it in my family, and it's my favorite way of prep. But if you didn't want to have so much of the tomato base, you could lessen the use of crushed tomatoes. Any of those features that you think would give you the results that you're looking for. So now what I want to do is I usually like to take a quick taste. It's pretty close. Now this step is optional. It's a step that I like. I like my beans to have a little bit of spice. So I'm going to add 1 tablespoon of red chili pepper flakes. Sometimes, especially in my garden, when I have fresh jalapenos, I'll add those as well. In this case, I was going to try to keep them more traditional using the red chili to add a more traditional flavor profile than bringing in jalapenos. But again, whatever works for you, you should go for it. So let's keep stirring these. And then finally, depending on the taste, and really this is where you have to try it yourself. When you get to the point, sometimes your tomatoes just are still very acidic. And in order to cut through that, we use some of the tomato paste or the concentrate to help out. But you may also want to think about adding just a hint of sugar. And so this is where I usually like to taste it. Man, that's really good. I can taste the tartness coming out of those canned tomatoes. And the fresh tomatoes I had that weren't fully ripe, they're still just a bit tart. So I'm going to add about a teaspoon of white granulated sugar. For those that are wondering, when I'm counting calories and stuff, sometimes I'll just use Splenda. I'll use a packet or 2 of Splenda in here. It gives me the same results and it reduces the calories a bit. Those that want something more all natural, you can just use regular white granulated sugar. So once you feel that you're getting that to the right spot, let's keep mixing this around, turning this around. And I think we're almost there perfectly. The next step in here is the step that we all really have to do, and that's wait. Usually your green beans are going to take somewhere between 30 minutes and an hour to get tender in this. It really has not a lot of effect on the temperature that you do and how much liquid's in this. So in this case right now, I've got my heat set to low, and I'm just going to bring this to a simmer. You don't want to burn anything here, so let's just make sure we get this really nicely done. Looks like there's enough liquid in here. I feel pretty good about this. Let me taste it one more time. Man, that's really good. I'm surprised. First shot, and I think the spicing is just perfect on it. It's got a really nice savory flavor. I can feel that coriander, a little bit of the cumin in it. It's really nice. Oh, cinnamon, that's the other one. And that nutmeg's really playing a nice role in here. So I think that's about right. I probably would put just a hint more of sugar. It's still kind of bitter. So this brings us up to somewhere around 2 teaspoons of sugar now. And then finally, I'm going to add just a hint of salt to bring all the flavors to the top. So this would be somewhere in the neighborhood of another teaspoon. I'll put the final recipe in all the comments so you can just follow us along. And of course, if you're making this and it doesn't come out exactly like you want, you have any questions, just leave me a comment and I'll try to help out. Give this one last stir. I think I've got the flavors right where I want them. The spice, those red chilies were great. The chili powder, chili flakes were great. Oh yeah, that's perfect. That's exactly what it needed. Okay, so now what we want to do is cover this and we'll let this sit for about an hour. I appreciate you joining me live here on Higher Cooking. I'll do a follow-up to show you the final of this, so please tune in. But as of right now, adios.